This is Euronews Now. I'm Helena Humphrey. Here are your top stories. Russia rejects calls to demilitarize the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant after the UN calls for an urgent end of military activity to prevent a potential disaster. Serbia and Kosovo fail to reach an agreement on easing tensions between the two countries at talks mediated by the EU foreign policy chief. And Finland's Prime Minister's in trouble for having too much fun. Opposition parties want her to take a drug test after a video emerged of her partying with friends.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, his Turkish counterpart Recep Tayyip Erdogan and the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres met in Lviv, with the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant top of the agenda. Erdogan conveyed a message on behalf of Russia, saying it is ready to negotiate peace. Zelensky, however, was sceptical of this.
I am very surprised that they are ready for some kind of peace. People who kill, rape, hit our civilian cities with cruise missiles every day cannot want peace. They should first leave our territory, then we will see.
Another important issue is grain, with the UN Secretary-General wanting to speed up humanitarian shipments of Ukrainian cereals.
We have seen signs that global food markets are beginning to stabilize. But let's have no illusions. There is a long way to go before this will be translated into the daily life of people at their local bakery and in their markets. Supply chains are still disrupted and energy and transportation costs remain unacceptably high.
But the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant was the main point of discussion, with Guterres calling for an urgent withdrawal of military activity. Both Moscow and Kiev accuse each other of sparking the conflict.
We do not want to experience another Chernobyl. Turkey is exerting its influence to end the conflict through a diplomatic solution, as it has stood, and will continue to stand by our Ukrainian friends.
Ankara has tried to keep a balanced position in this conflict, supplying arms to Ukraine while also not supporting Western sanctions imposed on Russia. On Thursday, Kyiv and Ankara signed an agreement on the reconstruction of infrastructure destroyed by Russian bombing.
The aftermath of two separate Russian attacks on the city of Kharkiv in northeastern Ukraine. With at least 17 people confirmed dead, the search continues for survivors following the rocket strikes on Wednesday through to Thursday morning. Several residential buildings were hit in the bombardments, and the death toll is expected to rise.
This is the situation. The biggest losses that Kharkiv has suffered since the beginning of the war. I'm talking about people, human casualties and wounded. A day of mourning will be declared in the city.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has condemned the attacks on the country's second largest city as a cynical strike on civilians with no justification. For its part, Russia claims it targeted a temporary base of foreign mercenaries, killing 90 of them. Meanwhile, local authorities say 2 Russian villages were evacuated yesterday after a fire broke out at an ammunition depot near the border with Ukraine. The blaze comes days after explosions at a military base and munitions depot in annexed Crimea. And Russia says it's deployed warplanes armed with state-of-the-art hypersonic missiles to the country's Kaliningrad region, an enclave surrounded by 2 NATO nations. As tensions rise between Serbia and Kosovo, the European Union has been trying to play mediator, but to no avail. A meeting yesterday between EU Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell and leaders from the 2 nations ended without reaching an agreement. Borrell says it's important for the 2 nations to normalize their relations, particularly given the current context.
And this happened at the moment when we are in a critical time for Europe. We see the return of war to our continent after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. we are facing a dramatic and very dangerous moment for our continent. And this is not a moment for increasing tensions. It is time for looking for solutions.
Before meeting with Borrell, the two leaders met separately with NATO leader Jens Stoltenberg. The latest tension follows Kosovo's decision that Serbian identity documents and vehicle license plates would no longer be valid in its territory. Belgrade has been implementing the same measures for people from Kosovo crossing into Serbia for years, saying accepting them would amount to recognizing its neighbor as an independent state. Serbia still refuses to recognize Kosovo's independence declared in 2008.
We're marching to Belgrade because we want to ask Mr. Milosevic kindly to leave.
Finland's Prime Minister Sanna Marin has defended her private life after a video emerged of her at a party with friends. She's pictured at a private residence with Finnish singer Elma, a member of parliament and other celebrities. Opposition leaders are calling on her to take a voluntary drug test, saying a shadow of doubt has been cast over the leader. These videos are private, Sanna Marin has told reporters. I'm displeased they have been spread out to the public. I was spending an evening with my friends, partying, dancing and singing. A journalist asks were there any intoxicants used. Alcohol, the Prime Minister says. Drugs, another reporter asks. Not to my knowledge, says the leader. Finland's youngest Prime Minister says she will not change in the wake of the controversy. Last year, she apologised for visiting a bar after coming into contact with someone who had coronavirus. She was criticised but ultimately found to not have broken any rules.
The man accused of stabbing British-American author Salman Rushdie at a literary event pleaded not guilty to attempted murder and assault at a court hearing in upstate New York. Hadi Matar, 24, was answering to a grand jury indictment after he allegedly stormed the stage at last Friday's event and stabbed Rushdie repeatedly in the neck and abdomen. Rushdie, who was airlifted to hospital, survived the incident, but suffered life-changing injuries.
A federal judge in the United States says he's leaning towards releasing part of an affidavit justifying an FBI search last week of former President Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate. He says it's the government's task to show why an edited version of the document should not be released, and has given the Department of Justice 1 week to suggest which parts of it should be cut out. This follows an application by several news organizations to unseal additional records because of high public interest in the case. Federal prosecutors looking into whether Trump illegally removed classified and sensitive government records after leaving office want the affidavit to remain sealed, arguing it could compromise the investigation and discourage witness cooperation. Trump has called for the release of the unredacted affidavit, saying it would be in the interests of what he described as transparency.
The Trump Organization's longtime chief financial officer, Alan Weisselberg, leaving a New York court on Thursday after pleading guilty to 15 counts of felony tax fraud. 75-year-old Weisselberg will serve 5 months in prison and has agreed to testify truthfully at the criminal trial of former US President Donald Trump's real estate company in October. He has, however, refused to cooperate with prosecutors or testify against Donald Trump personally.
Plenty more coming up after a short break. Do stay with us if you can.